Tonight is the start of a series of interviews, which we call Green Party Alternative 2016. Since the Green Party is a FEC qualified political party, we have a nomination process somewhat similar to the corporate parties, in that since we have ballot access in 21 states already, and more states are being added on, the state parties will have either primaries or caucuses, and those that do not yet have ballot lines will have conventions. We have a number of candidates who are either exploring or have already announced to seek the Green Party nomination for president. And with that, we are going to go through and interview a number of our candidates. Tonight's candidate, our first candidate exploring, has an exploratory committee, is Darryl Cherney. Darryl Cherney is a longtime Earth First activist, is well known for having been victimized by a car bomb with Judi Bari. Both survived and sued both the Oakland Police Department and the FBI for various violations of rights. Darryl will talk more about that. He has previously run for office, and he'll talk about that, and has held local office. So Darryl has been a long-time political activist.
I grew up in Midtown Manhattan. I spent the first 30 years of my life in New York. And I always felt within my heart that I was missing something, and that the something I was missing was nature. But I honestly had no idea how to get from there to here, or from here to there. But finally, I just uprooted myself from the city, pointed my van west, and wound up in Northern California. And it was there that I learned that the ancient redwood trees were being mowed down, in large part because of a corporate takeover. The Maxam Corporation had bought out the Pacific Lumber Company through a Wall Street takeover that involved all the famous players: Michael Milken, Ivan Boesky, all the notorious guys who went to jail, prison even. But this was resulting not just in workers losing their jobs, which is of course horrifying, but also the mowing down of 1,000-year-old redwood trees. So as I walked into the EPIC office, the Environmental Protection Information Center in Garberville, California, I saw a little sticker on the door. It said, "Earth First, no compromise in defense of Mother Earth." And so what I made some inquiries and found out that Earth First was pretty much a tribalistic, non-hierarchical, non-organization that was just my cup of tea. I wasn't really into having a boss or having too much in the way of a president and vice president, but Earth First did operate by a consensus, and it did have a nonviolence code. And so I immediately just started organizing protests under the Earth First banner against the Maxam Corporation and the takeover of Pacific Lumber. First locally and then nationally, and probably between 1986 and 2003, when I organized my last protest, I'd organized hundreds of protests and filed lawsuits, and was involved in filing lawsuits for the environment. Ran for office, as I mentioned, on a pro-environment campaign. Engaged the banking regulators because there was a failed savings and loan involved in the process. Worked with the workers because their pension fund had been ripped off. Worked with the unions. It was a very dynamic, broad-based campaign. And of course, in the middle of all this, I was also writing new songs because I am a songwriter. I'm a troubadour. I was meeting Judi Bari, who was a world-class union organizer, and then joined with me to defend the redwoods, and in essence became involved in quite a famous national campaign that wound up protecting about 10,000 acres of what we called Headwaters Forest. And we have a national reserve as a result of our efforts. It wasn't everything we wanted, but we did have some measure of success. Even Julia Butterfly's tree sit, the famous 2-year tree sit, was part of our campaign. I did a lot of press for that. In that whole period of time, I was fundraising. I was writing press releases galore. I was lobbying legislatures. I was going to public hearings along with hundreds of my friends. But I was, and I am an organizer. And probably the culmination of all those efforts was the production of my movie, which came out in 2012, called Who Bombed Judi Bari? And of course, in the middle of everything I also just told you, we were car bombed while organizing to save the Redwoods. Judi Bari and I were driving out of Oakland on our way to sing and give a slideshow and some talks at UC Santa Cruz when a bomb went off in Judy's car, almost killing her on May 24th, 1990. And so we were immediately arrested by the FBI and Oakland police jointly for being bombers whose bomb had gone off accidentally when we were nonviolent activists who were trying to save the Redwoods. And so this is a very important juncture of both the environmental movement and the civil rights movement. And so as Judi Bari would say, and as I would say, all one issue. The issues that everybody deals with cannot be separated. And that's the short version of a 13-year journey. And I will say that I have a long track record of staying with campaigns, whether it was 13 years saving Headwaters, whether it was 14 years suing the FBI and winning and collecting, by the way, some money on that. And even making the movie, which has taken 3, 4, 5 years out of my life. I think it's very important as activists, once we start something, we see it through to completion.
Let me ask you, you mentioned that you had run for office. I understand you had run in the Democratic primary for Congress. Can you tell me what led you to that first campaign? What in your life? And was that before Earth First or during?
It was during, in the early days of our Earth First campaign to save the Redwoods, to save Headwaters Forest. We had what we called a timber Democrat in power. His name was Congressman Doug Bosco. He was a total sleazeball. He was anti-choice. He was pro-death squads in El Salvador. He was for logging the forest. He was even for offshore oil drilling on our beautiful coastline of over here on the North Coast. And so it was just appalling to me that Democrats would support a man who had such anti-environment, anti-civil rights positions on just about everything. So I decided to challenge him in the Democratic primary. This is before there was a Green Party, although the Greens were having a lot of meetings in California during this time and having annual meetings and regional meetings. This is before the Green Party was credentialed, certified in the state of California. So that's what drove me to run in the Democratic primary. And I wrote songs and I sang them, songs like Where's Bosco? And Running for My Life, and We're All Dead Ducks, about the offshore oil issue. So it was a fun campaign, and actually the 4 months or so that I engaged in the Democratic primary were like taking a 4-year course in poli-science. It was just an amazingly educational campaign. And what was really fascinating to me about the Democrats is that Doug Bosco was a youthful, baby-faced congressman. And for some reason, women in particular, but people in general, seemed to think that that meant he was a liberal or that meant he had some kind of environmental sensibilities. And I was astounded when I walked up to people and said, hey, did you know that your congressman supports offshore oil drilling? And I had one woman just hold her ears and shake her head, said, no, 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 don't tell me that. And so this is where, I mean, I'd always was, of course, suspicious of the Democratic and Republican duopoly that we have. But it was amazing what kind of denial the Democrats were in, especially around that particular congressman.
I understand you had met a very important volunteer during that campaign. Can you tell me who that was?
Yeah, absolutely. In the early days of me running for Congress, I was designing my brochure, my little 3-page fold-out. And I wasn't very good with straight lines, and these are the days before Photoshop. Most people did not have computers. I was a good typist, but did not know how to use computers. And I was telling the director of the Mendocino Environmental Center, Betty Ball, that I was having trouble with my graphic design. And she said, I know a great graphic designer. Her name is Judi Bari. And like on cue, she blows in through the Mendocino Environmental Center door like a gust of wind and comes over to me and starts helping me lay out my brochure while she trashes my campaign, telling me that I'm an idiot for thinking that I can change anything by running for public office. Judi was a true radical. She was a union activist. She led a wildcat strike in Washington, D.C. against the United States Post Office. She had a wall of labor books, like hundreds of them that I used to borrow from once I got to know her. And she basically felt that you couldn't change the system by working inside the system. Now, this may be a contradiction to the fact that I'm exploring a presidential campaign, but that's why Judi Bari and I are different people. So, as while she was busy laying out my brochure, at the same time telling me that I was an idiot for running for office, I fell in love with her. I immediately invited myself over to her house. It was love at first sight, and we had a 2-year romance, which was part of a 9-year comradeship that we engaged in as political organizing partners, in which we took on the Maxam Pacific Lumber campaign, we took on Louisiana Pacific Lumber, we took on Georgia Pacific Lumber, and of course, Judi was the target of that car bomb, which injured us both, but almost killed Judi. And she was a target in that because she was union organizing the timber workers while she was organizing with Earth First. She was a bridge builder. And I would say to you that the dominant paradigm's primary tactic, I'll go out and just say it flat out, the primary tactic of the system that would destroy us is divide and conquer. And Judi was the antithesis of that. She was unite. She was about finding what I call the highest common denominator. And together we expanded on leftism. It wasn't that all value is derived from labor, it's that all value is derived from the earth. Labor adds value, but it's the earth that provides the raw materials, and it is a finite resource, even though it can regenerate. So my work with Judi Bari was pretty much daily for 9 years, and that's why I wound up making a movie about her. Who Bombed Judi Bari? Came out in 2012. I'm happy to get it to any Green Party people who'd like it. And it's really, if you're interested in my presidential exploration committee, that film, a 93-minute documentary that won 6 awards, is a very good profile of not just Judi Bari, but also myself.
So with that, how did that evolve into Earth First? In other words, was there a connection between your campaign and political activism? Once the campaign is over, did you want to? I assume you wanted to be an activist.
Well, Earth First believes in using all the tools in the toolbox. And so running for public office, I'm not the only Earth Firster who did it. I could list you people like Randy Prince, who ran for Congress in Oregon, and people like that. But basically, it's not about being an Earth Firster is not about one tactic or another tactic. It's about putting the Earth first. It's understanding that there are no jobs on a dead planet. There is no Palestinian-Israeli conflict on a dead planet. That the planet itself must come first. The ecosystems must come first. As environmentalists, and really we prefer to think of ourselves as Earth warriors, we're not interested in a 2-martini lunch with a Congress creature in order to gain access and lose all of our integrity in the process. We say exactly what we mean. We say exactly what is necessary for life to continue on this planet, and we understand that human beings are part of this planet, and like we teach our children, it's necessary for us to share. We're not doing that right now.
So how did going through being a candidate and as an activist for Earth First, what brought you to the Green Party preceding this campaign? Why did you? I mean, why not, as some other people are doing? Why not try to continue doing it through the Democratic Party?
Well, the Green Party was an obvious choice, and I joined the Green Party. I changed my registration to the Green Party as soon as there was a Green Party to change my registration to. First of all, running for Congress in the Democratic primary, which was at the time my only choice. Well, actually, there was the Peace and Freedom Party, and we had discussions, but there was a Peace and Freedom Party candidate at the time. But having participated in the Democratic primary, it's pretty much a lock on whoever the machine candidate is. So it's not like somebody like myself can be nominated in the process. It's also clearly a corporate party. If you take a look at what's happened under the Obama administration, or for that matter under the Bill Clinton administration, both of those administrations started with Democratic majorities in the Congress and the Senate. They could have been able to put through agendas of a very progressive nature with a full majority, but they did not do so. And that's because they are beholden to the moneyed interests. And so ultimately Wall Street owns the Democratic Party as much as it owns the Republican Party. The Green Party, first of all, I'm an earth warrior, I'm an environmental activist, I'm a green. It's a natural fit.
So tell me, in process of becoming a green, have you held political office or been appointed, or what's your background post becoming an Earth First activist and a green?
Well, I have held political office, and I've also unofficially managed some political campaigns, a number of which we've won. But the office I held was on the Southern Humboldt Community Healthcare District. So I was basically I was appointed because there was nobody who ran for the position. And I want to get to that a little bit later when it comes to Green Party, party building, because there's a lot of uncontested or unfilled political seats out there, probably thousands and thousands of them, if the truth be told. And so I'd always wanted to hold political office. I'm very interested in healthcare. I was living with a nurse at the time, but even just beside that point, I'm a healer. I really feel great compassion when people are sick, and I felt that our hospital, our local hospital and clinic, was of paramount importance to our community. And you know, there's that old expression, act locally and think globally, which sometimes I just say act and think glocally. But I firmly believe in taking on the local issues as well as the national issues. It keeps me grounded. It gives me a base of support in my community, because if you are not supported in your community, you have no business branching out beyond it. So I held that office for 4 years on basically what is known as the hospital board. And I have to tell you, it was a nightmare. It was a non-paying position. It was a 4-year term, as in prison term. I found that the hospital was corrupt. There was, for example, they hired an embezzler straight out of jail to handle purchasing. They were skimming a lot of money off of the pension fund. They were not providing quality health care at all. They chased out the doctor who had been there for 35 years because they didn't want to give his wife a $2 an hour raise. The average pay around the hospital was like $14-15 an hour for healthcare workers. You know, nurses might be making $22-25 an hour. The head of the clinic wanted to make $22 an hour instead of $20 an hour. The head of the clinic, a medical clinic, and so she was married to the principal doctor, and they refused to give it to her. And so we lost our doctor of 35 years who handled 3,000 patients in our small town. This is the nightmare that I went through as an elected official. I was in the wrong end of a 4-1 vote, more than I care to tell you. I was threatened with violence twice in the meeting room, and I like to say the true jest that our hospital board was just as corrupt as Congress. Only if you're in Congress, you're making a couple $100,000 a year for the privilege of getting beaten up if you're one of us. Here, it was a pure labor of love, but I was determined to fill out my 4-year seat because I finished the projects I start. But I can tell you that electoral politics is just horrifying, and yet here I am, a glutton for punishment, trying it again, this time considering running for president. But I will say, since we're talking about the hospital board, that the thing I've noticed about the Tea Party, if I can just get into that for a second, is that they target the school boards. And part of my platform, which we haven't gotten into yet, is that children are the most important resource that we have. I am a father. If I run, I am going to run as a parent, because parents are really, that's a universal language. It's something that everybody understands. And the Tea Party understands this, which is why they've loaded their people, their creationist believers, onto school boards across the United States. And so I would say, as a member of the Green Party, even if I'm jumping a little ahead of myself, that part of our party building has to be to run for these smaller offices, and I would say in specifically the school boards. Yes, there are community services districts that work on your utilities. Yes, there's hospital boards. Yes, there's different kinds of constables and things like that. But if you want to make a real difference, a passionate difference in holding public office, be a school board member and look for those unopposed seats, or for that matter, run in the election and win it.
It's almost ironic because as you described the position that you were in, I can imagine why there's some fear amongst Greens for running for local office, because I know in my experience, although I haven't held local office, I've worked on some very local campaigns. Sometimes the corruption on local politics is frightening because a lot of the public doesn't pay attention. I know in New York City, we no longer have school boards because of the corruption involved. They became patronage systems where people were elected, even though they're not paid positions. They had the power of handing out contracts. So that's where the pay to play happened. You know, friends got people contracts in return in some other method other than their salary. There were forms of kickbacks, and the problem is, particularly in New York City, is the media. The city is so large, and the media entities are so large that outside of community newspapers, which had very low readership, no one knew what was going on. So they ended up trashing the school boards. So talking about that, since we're on that, and I know other municipalities are going through the same thing, where there's fights for mayoral control over the school boards. There's power struggles. As someone who's a veteran of local politics, since this is part of, let's talking local for a second, what kind of reforms would you tell a local Green candidate to try to institute to make sure these local, often unpaid positions or part-time paid positions at most can actually institute reforms, fighting against, as you were talking about, votes of 4-1. How do you fight that? How do you appeal to the public, and how do you execute a change? What would that be?
Well, for starters, one of the things that I was responsible for was changing the meeting times to lunchtime, so that we didn't, when I first started on the school board, we had 9 o'clock in the morning meetings. Trust me, nobody's coming to those meetings. And in particular, not even the employees of the hospital and the health and the clinic could come to those meetings because they were working. So I made sure that our meetings were held during lunchtime. Sometimes you try to find a proposal that, even if you're sort of on the wrong end of the stick, the 4-1 stick, you find a proposal that even your adversaries can't oppose, like having it during when the public can make it. Another thing you can do, this is not a reform, but it's a tactic, is I use the media a lot. This is not always as easy in big cities as it is in small towns, but I made sure that I invited the press. I told them what the controversial issues were. I also invited the public to attend. I'd write letters to the editor. I'd go on the local community radio station. Here we have KMUD Garberville, but lots of communities have local radio stations. I'd put on public service announcements and make sure, and I do local interviews and make sure that people came. Become a media personality. When you are a public official, part of your responsibility is to communicate to the public, and the press is one way of doing that. I tried to get more women's services at our healthcare district. I was astounded at the resistance that I met up against. And those were the kinds of things that, good ideas that seemed to make common sense, like just offering more, prenatal. I wanted to have to bring back our birthing center. And I was not able to do so. But I at least alerted the public as to the corruption, and also you can encourage your friends to run. So you might suffer for 2 years until the next round of elections comes on, but then, as I did, I fished out 2 candidates for office and got one of them elected. As I said, an unofficial campaign manager, and got one of the 2 elected, and the other one got elected later on in another election. So those are some of the things you can do, but you have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to build upon something, and also you have to be able to identify what I call the highest common denominator, those push-button issues that everybody can agree on, and but still haven't come to be in whatever your school board is. So those are some suggestions I have from my experience.
Getting back to Earth First for a moment, we have a question coming in from the chat room, and I think you sort of alluded to the answer, but they probably want to hear more directly. Is what did you do specifically for Earth First? Because as you know, and part of the issue around the car bomb incident is there were accusations that Earth First were eco-terrorists. So describe what your actual tactics and strategy were. Hands-on, give specifics.
Absolutely. Well, every Earth First gathering, every Earth First campaign I'd ever been to, nationally as well as the many that we had locally, had a nonviolence code. At the end of every Round River Rendezvous, which is the National Earth First Gathering, and Round River, by the way, is the river of water to the sky and then back down again to the earth. That's the Round River of condensation and rain, up and down. That's why it's called the Round River Rendezvous. Every Round River Rendezvous had nonviolence trainings. The tactics I used were conventional protests, having speakers. We definitely did lockdowns. We'd chain our necks to things. I sat in trees twice, for example. I did 2 tree sits, one in Yager Creek, South Fork, and one in the Enchanted Meadow over in Albion. I supported Julia Butterfly's tree sit. We had a mass arrest. We had 1,033 people arrested in one single day, with including Bonnie Raitt. Judi Bari was there was over 6,000 people at that rally. Now, as far as the whole Earth First mythology about monkey wrenching and sabotage, I would say to you, absolutely, the Earth First Journal, even to this day, has a forum for sabotage and defense of Mother Earth. We did not do that kind of sabotage, and we very specifically said that we didn't do it through our local nonviolence code, because Earth First was completely decentralized. There was no national figures. I mean, there were national figures, but there was no national authority. But I would say to anybody who's concerned that Earth First might have been involved in some sabotage, which it, by the way, to my knowledge, Earth Firsters were never actually, did sabotage, at least not in the name of Earth First. I would say to you, look at the unions. The unions are huge in sabotage. In fact, I would say the unions have even been known to rough up a scab or two in their time. Look at the sabotage that's happening to Mother Earth right now. The destruction of our Earth has reached a point where we are all about to die. We are about to be demolished by climate change, and the ensuing diseases and the changes of the new insects that are coming along down the path and finding their way migrating, the deaths of animals, the the toxins that are in our air, the dying of the oceans. This is the sabotage that's occurring. If Earth First along the way sabotaged a bulldozer here or there, it's nothing compared to what's happening to our planet. Now, I'm not sitting here advocating sabotage in defense of Mother Earth, but what I am saying is that everybody sabotages something. When you turn on the key to your car, you are sabotaging the air, you're sabotaging the environment. It's not a question of do you believe in sabotage, it's a question of what do you sabotage for.
Well, taking that as a topic a little bit further, since the incident that one of the incidents that you're well known for, you and Judi Bari, was the car bomb, and a lot of that had to do with the police and FBI accusing the two of you specifically as being terrorists, and that's why there was a car bomb in your car. So explain to me what you know of it, because I know there are still unanswered questions, and how you responded to Oakland PD and to the FBI's accusations.
Yes, well, it's a very thick issue, and of course, I produced a whole movie about it. Go to whobombedjudibari.com, and you can order my movie. I'm also willing to give 50 free copies away to the first 50 Green Party members who ask for it. My email, by the way, is dc@asis.com. That's my initials, dc@asis.com. But to answer your question, or Who Bombed Judi Bari, that's JUDIBARI.com. The ayes have it. However, the Judi Bari had a very strict nonviolence code that we all implemented. In fact, I was the chairman of the nonviolence committee that established a nonviolence code that actually included not just use of no weapons, no sabotage, but even no drinking, no drugs, but also even like respecting fire danger and no verbal abuse, no use of profanity. And we had a very strict nonviolence code. You violated any of that. You abused a woman in our base camp, and you were escorted out by our own peacekeepers. So, and Judi was also organizing, as I mentioned, with the timber workers, which of course was a huge threat. She got, I mean, imagine a radical Earth First woman is organizing timber workers in the sawmills to the point where they're wearing Earth First shirts to work, handing out and she was organizing them into the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies. So she's got them handing out wobbly materials, signing them up into the IWW. This is at Louisiana Pacific, Pacific Lumber, Georgia Pacific. She had even gone to the point of representing 5 Georgia Pacific sawmill workers in labor court against Elizabeth Dole's Department of Labor back in 1989. So Judi Bari was a double threat, environment and union organizer, bridging two adversaries, destroying the divide and conquer mythology. Not mythology, but the divide and conquer paradigm. So we were completely nonviolent. We were musicians on our way to a performance. But yes, Earth First had this mythology of the Monkey Wrench Gang by Edward Abbey and things that had appeared in our paper. So another thing to remember is that the person who was in charge of the San Francisco Bureau of the FBI was Richard W. Held, the man who hunted down Leonard Peltier in Canada, the man who put Geronimo G. Jaga Pratt in prison for 27 years until they let him out because he was innocent. We had a major COINTELPRO operative, a major disciple of J. Edgar Hoover, who was in charge of the Bureau, in charge of our case. And so the fact that there was disinformation, there was false press releases, there was death threats galore coming from all over the country, interestingly. There was a total disinformation campaign. And to just put it simply, they said they arrested us because nails on the bomb that were strapped around the bomb for shrapnel matched nails in a bag in the back of Judi Bari's car. Judi Bari was a foreman at California Yurts. She headed a 6-man construction crew, and she called herself a foreman, by the way, even though she was a radical feminist. And so she had nails in the back of her car, in her station wagon. She was actually putting a new roof on the rental that she was about to move into. She was renovating her own rental before she moved into it. So so the nails in the bomb were finishing nails, and the nails in the bag in the back of her car were roofing nails. Finishing nails are long and skinny. Roofing nails are short and squat with a big round head. And finishing nail, saying that these nails were identical is like saying a Volkswagen and a Rolls Royce are identical because they're both cars. They also said that the bomb was in plain view in the back seat, and so therefore we should have seen it, and therefore it was our bomb, when the bomb was in fact hidden underneath the driver's seat, intended to kill Judi Bari. It was a pipe bomb, and it had a motion trigger. And they knew that from minute one. They found the motion device. So the fact is, the bomb would only go off in a moving car. Now, who the hell would put a pipe bomb underneath your driver's seat that would be triggered to go off in a moving car? I don't think that we would do such a thing. You know, we're actually pretty smart people. And then to take it a step further, somebody actually took credit for bombing us. Somebody calling himself the Lord's Avenger, who took some kind of fundamentalist Christian point of view, saying that he bombed Judi Bari because of her pro-choice position, because she had defended a Planned Parenthood clinic, and also because she had led the loggers astray into her pagan ways. And by the way, Judi Bari was kind of an atheist, but the Lord's Avenger thought she was a pagan. And so somebody took credit for the bombing and described the bomb in Judi Bari's car perfectly, like 80 different ingredients. He obviously knew what the bomb was made out of, and so therefore the letter had authenticity. So the FBI just said, oh, the letter writer must be one of Judi Bari's friends, designed to take attention away from her and Daryl. I was in the passenger seat. I was just slightly injured, but I was arrested with her, and I did sue the FBI and the Oakland police with her. And even though Judi Bari lived through the bombing, she died from cancer in 1997, but her lawyers, our lawyers, myself and her estate, took it to trial, and we were awarded $4.4 million by a jury right after 9/11. Our trial was right after. It was, in fact, our trial was delayed because of 9/11, and we had to have it in April of 2012, and a jury awarded us $4.4 million, and we collected $4 million from them and the Oakland police because well, we had more daggers hanging over their heads than in the appeals process than they had over ours. So we beat the FBI, and I'll tell you what we beat them for. We didn't beat them for bombing us. That's a false thing that some people think. We beat them for violations of the First Amendment, that they violated our freedom of speech by knowingly lying about us in order to discredit us politically. And I'll tell you right now, in the nearly 100-year history of the FBI, nobody has done what we did. The Socialist Workers' Party did sue the FBI in court for freedom of speech, and they won, I believe, in Massachusetts back in the 70s. But nobody took them to the tailors for $4 million the way we did. And believe me, not only were we innocent, but the city of Oakland made May 24th Judi Bari Day, and in response to our lawsuit, and to this day, I have an ongoing investigation to find out who bombed Judi Bari and myself.
So you have a history of being very effective, challenging the system, even under some very difficult odds, whether as an activist or political candidate, a local office holder. So you have a diverse experience. What brings you to your present life decision possibility in considering running as a Green Party presidential candidate? What would you like to do? How are you different than how are you an alternative to other potential candidates? What makes Daryl Cherney in terms of his laundry list of issues?
Well, first of all, why am I running? Well, I heard the call. Well, actually, the call actually came on the telephone. It was an actual call. My friend Judith Swyman out of New York City, who I used to date, and we were also in a band together back in New York in the early '80s. She called me up and said she had an epiphany. She said she had the answer to everything. I said, "What is that, Judith?" She said, "You should run for president." And she says it's an epiphany, and I know I'm right. Well, I can't speak to the party to tell you whether Judith was right or not, but I trust her intuition. So I put up my Facebook page, the Darryl Cherney for President Exploratory Committee. And I said, you know, you had an epiphany. I'll go along with this for a while. I'll see if your intuition is well founded. And so what has happened in this time that I've put up that simple Facebook page is I have met an enormous number of Green Party members on the phone, on email, via Skype. I have made a lot of new friends. I have started to develop. I really wanted to apply a lot of my Earth First, biocentric biology coming first, direct action principles, no compromise in defense of Mother Earth. See how those principles can play out nationally, how they can play out internationally. All those long nights driving in a car to the next action, thinking about different things about the world and the problems of the world. How could I maybe I could try to formulate all of those ideas I've been having for decades into a platform. And then additionally, I have had to study on the issues as I'm considering running for president, particularly of late, the Palestine-Israel issue, but much more than that. There are so many issues that are out there, and I have books waiting to be read on Russia, on China, on the history of the world, for that matter. It's very important. Sun Tzu in The Art of War says that the most important tactic, the most important component in winning any battle is intelligence, which means knowledge. That in order to understand an issue, the more knowledge you have on that issue, the better a chance you have of solving the problem. And so I've immersed myself with advisors, and I worked on my speech giving abilities, and it has been a wonderful experience thus far. And so you asked me, what makes me different? Well, first of all, there are several other declared or either declared candidates or people considering. And one of the things that I would say to you is that Jill Stein, who, by the way, I have immense respect for, and who I have pledged to support if I don't wind up being the nominee, and if I do run against her in the primary, I lose, I have pledged to donate $500 to her campaign. I will donate to her no matter what. And Jill, by the way, in all fairness, has signed my petition to be able to participate in the presidential forum. So we have Green Party solidarity here. But if we have to put out a difference, Jill's motto is "The future's in our hands," and one of my mottos is "The future is in our hearts." I am, even though I'm certainly a mind person and I have my own intellect, I think really that the way to reach people is through their hearts, through music, through arts, through dance, through children, through love, through humor, and that can translate into politics. In fact, just for example, today I was reading Huffington Post, and there's the president of India talking to Putin, suggesting that he do yoga. And Putin's talking about doing yoga. Now, these are world leaders who are talking about engaging in both physical and spiritual practices. Another news event that was very interesting after I declared myself to be a potentially openly pagan presidential candidate. I don't know if there have been others who have been as openly pagan as myself. I'm in a book called Modern Pagans, if anybody wants to read it. But that Latvia, the nation of Latvia, just elected a Green Party president who is an open pagan. So there you go. People laughed at me for saying I'm an openly pagan Green Party potential candidate for president. And next thing you know, 2 months after I said that, the Greens elected an openly pagan president. So even though I have hard positions on the issues, for example, if I may say, the Palestinian people should have the right to vote in Israel. All of them. They should have the right to return. And we should have an international framework for doing such a thing for the refugees. But even though I have hard positions like the one I just mentioned to you, I also think that a president needs to be funny. A president needs to have a sense of spirit. 99% of the people in this world have some kind of spirituality going on. A president, can relate to people as a parent. And that is, I think, what may distinguish me from the other candidates.
So talk a little bit more about some of your issues platform. What would you like to do? What messages do you want to deliver in the campaign, and should raising this of consciousness happen in the United States? Should you take the White House green? What would Darryl Cherney do?
Well, the first thing I'll do is I'll paint it green. Actually, that's not the first thing I'll do. I think it's the second thing I'll do. Because, you know, the White House, I mean, even the fact that it's white, is that the irony of that is not escaped on many people in this country. So at very minimum, I would like to paint the pillars of the White House green. And, you know, even though I said this in my platform, next thing you know, when gay marriage was approved by the Supreme Court, Obama colored the entire White House with rainbow colors. So the symbolism of the color of the White House is not something to be taken as lightly as some people might think. But the first thing, and before I even tell you the first thing, let me say that there are certain things that a Green Party candidate can say, oh yeah, I believe in this and I believe in that. But as I want to talk to you about what I will do as President of the United States. So the first thing that I will do on my first day in office is I'm going to pardon and free Leonard Peltier. I will also issue pardons for Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, and take a look at all the other political prisoners in this world, as well as issuing pardons for all the non-violent cannabis prisoners that are out there. But free Leonard Peltier is number one. The second thing I'm going to do, you know, is put those solar panels back on the White House, except do it for real. You know, cover the entire White House with solar. I've had solar panels in my life for years. I live in a heavily solar paneled area, and solar is more of a way of life where I live than most places around the country. And I live in a rainforest, and solar does us quite well. I'm speaking to you right now on solar power. So and it's also about leadership by example, and this is part of the initial step in getting us off the fossil fuel kick. In fact, we need to eliminate fossil fuels pretty much yesterday. And people say, well, is it realistic for us to all stop using fossil fuels? I'd say it's not realistic for us to continue using fossil fuels. You ban fossil fuels tomorrow, not another drop, and you'll watch the jobs and the infrastructure in this country boom, because there will be an immediate rush to retool every single building in this country with some kind of alternative energy. And even if it's passive solar, you're going to see a building boom like you've never seen before. The third thing I'm going to do is remove cannabis as a Schedule I drug. Cannabis should not be scheduled at all. It needs to be available for medicinal and recreational use. And the whole illegalization of cannabis is what puts so many people of color in prison. It's one of the foundations, the pillars of stop and frisk is to bust people for small amounts of cannabis. This is a human rights issue. Cannabis is also a great building material. It's a great paper product material. So descheduling cannabis, that's going to be on day number 3. Day number 4, we're going to convert the entire White House lawn to a veggie garden, a vegetable garden, and we're going to donate that food to the food bank, and we're also going to create seed banks where we donate seeds to people, because people need to start growing their own food. Again, leadership by example. I can do this without the permission of Congress, and we can bring in people to start farming the White House lawn, and we can start teaching people about the perils of obesity, the benefits of eating good, healthy food that you grow yourself, the money you can save, the exercise that you get from it. These are not small matters. Taking care of ourselves. We got to get rid of Monsanto. We've got to we got to stop subsidizing farmers not to grow food, for goodness sake. The fifth order of business is to order an immediate halt to fracking everywhere as a matter of a national emergency. We are destroying our waterways. We're destroying our aquifers, and not just through fracking, mind you, but water. My goodness, next to air, including, alongside air, is the sustenance of life. And we have to consider water a national resource, a public resource. Nobody can own the water. We're watching people in Detroit and other locations being deprived of their water, for goodness sake. The sixth thing I'm going to do is we need to all have a real investigation of 9/11. And I don't mean all the little weird conspiracy theories that go on. What happened in 9/11, more than the towers were toppled that day, more than the 3 towers were toppled that day, if you want to include Building 7, which I do. Our democracy was toppled. The war on terror began. Wars were started in Iraq and Afghanistan. Families were decimated everywhere. Children killed, fathers killed, mothers killed, land destroyed, artifacts, treasures looted and destroyed. We're living with the results of 9/11. We're seeing ISIL and all these other, and the civil wars in Syria and everywhere else is directly resulting from this terrible thing that happened. And there is every reason in the world to believe that there was some kind of inside job going on with 9/11. I am not here to tell you who it was, but I can also tell you that it stunk to holy high heaven the day it happened. And one of the other Green Party candidates for president, Cynthia McKinney, who I have the most immense respect for, she was one of the few people who stood up, and anybody who stands up for wanting to know the truth about that is squashed, because anyway, this is not a small matter. The seventh thing I'm going to do as president is order my attorney general to end what I call the war on people. We have a government between Wall Street, the banks, uneven sentencing guidelines, police brutality, student loans, export of jobs, stop and frisk. They're all targeting the poor and people who happen to have a darker color skin than the one that I happen to have. And I see the war on people as being a violation of the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. We like to talk about the 14th Amendment, which guarantees us all equal protection under the law, that our schools should be the same, that the way we're treated by law should be the same, and we know they're not. But the 8th Amendment, which frees us from cruel and unusual punishment, also happens to guarantee us against excessive fines and excessive bail. So when we watch people in Ferguson, Missouri, getting a parking ticket or a traffic ticket and then being thrown in jail, and watching their little $30 fine go up to $500, and their $500 fine going up to $1,000, and then being put in jail for that while their children are on the outside. This is a violation of the 8th Amendment. This is cruel and unusual punishment. And part of this, by the way, has to do with these local governments wanting to fund themselves through these fines of the poor, which means that they have an investment in crime happening. We have a government right now through the private prison complex and through the local municipalities like Ferguson, who have an investment in people committing crimes or creating crimes that they will then make people commit. And so the 8th Amendment, I believe, has to really be triggered a lot more than it already has been already. We need to review all the wars that we're engaging right now and get the hell out of there, because it seems that everything we march into winds up being worse. You know, if you want to take a look at ISIL right now, the Islamic State, a direct result of the Iraqi war. As Afghanistan and Iraq better places because of our presence? Hardly. Let's take a look at immigration. Our foreign policy is pretty much responsible for so much of the immigration that happens into this country. People don't leave their homes because everything is fine. They don't leave their homes because they have a great paying job. They leave their homes because they're oppressed. They leave their homes because they're destitute. And our country, our nation, the United States, props up dictators. It's involved in the assassination of democratically elected leaders and the coups, whether it's in Chile or Honduras or Haiti. We have been, and many other places, and this goes on for decades, by the way, as well as the current time. We have been involved in propping up dictatorships. Our support of the regime in Mexico and keeping people poor there is one of the primary reasons for people coming here. But the people who do come here, I say to you, welcome. You are taking the jobs that so many citizens of this country won't take. You are doing it for substandard wages. You're doing it through great risk to yourself. You're doing it to feed your families. This is a nation of immigrants, and I want to say thank you for all the work you're doing here, and I will support you in whatever it takes, whether it's a pathway to citizenship or whether it's to get your mother countries back on track, or to stop at least supporting the horrid regimes that exist there that force people to leave their homes. And Speaking of which, children. I've said that children are our most important resource. I am an older father of a 3-year-old daughter, and I can only tell you how precious a child is. And every time I hear of a bomb dropping on a Palestinian child or a whole bunch of children, or a wedding party in Afghanistan, or any of the horrid things, or for that matter, the birth defects from autism. Here we are blabbing about vaccinations while autism is running rampant and birth defects are running rampant in our country itself. And we're not seeing this as a health crisis. We're not seeing this as child abuse. We're not seeing this as something that is all about our future. We must help our children, and that involves social services. And I don't care what anybody says. We need to support mothers. We need to support fathers. We need to support them with jobs. We need to support them with welfare. We need to support them because we need to support their children, and we need to get people back on their feet. And so taking care of our children is super important. And in addition to that, we have a mental health and a drug crisis in this country. And when I plan to create a President's Commission on drug addiction, rehabilitation, education, and on mental health. I'm looking at the streets of our cities right now, and I see hordes of mostly young men, in fact, a lot of young white men, to be honest about it, who are addicted to methamphetamine, who are addicted to heroin, who are committing all these petty crimes, who are, in essence, invading towns and creating dangerous situations. But why are they here? Because the drugs are still being allowed to flow into this country. The educational system of our country is gone down the drain. The support for families is non-existent. And so that is why we need to support families of all colors, of all stripes, of all persuasions. We need to support families because it is in our own vested interest. All of us need to have a good education. Speaking of education, I think we need to start teaching our children foreign languages, starting at the age of 2 or 3. That's when you learn a foreign language the best. And our school systems have got it all backwards. We're teaching people meaningless history, meaningless skills. We should be teaching them auto mechanics. We should be teaching them carpentry. We should be teaching foreign languages. We should be teaching skills, computer skills. We should be teaching children skills that they can use to make us competitive in this world and to make us worthy of being the United States of America. So all these people who want the United States to be one language only, my goodness. When I was down in Belize, back in the late 90s, or it was the early 2000s, I'd meet young 10-year-olds who spoke 5 languages because they were guiding tourists. Speak English, Spanish, Chinese, German, and the local patois. It's just amazing how smart those kids are. Some of the smartest kids I've met have been poor kids, and often poor kids in foreign countries. We need to stop the privatization of our government. Who the hell said that corporations do things better than the government does? I mean, have you ever talked to your local cable provider recently, or internet provider, and tried to get some service? Did you ever bring a TV home and or a radio or your computer and found that it was broken upon opening? And look at all the garbage that's sold in the Walmarts and the Kmarts. This is what the private sector is giving us. And not only are they giving it to us, they're giving it to us by exporting the jobs. The private sector, who supposedly knows better, says, we know better, we're not going to hire Americans. That is the message from the private companies. No, I say to you, government actually can do things and has done things remarkably well, whether it's the library system, whether it's maintaining the educational system, whether it's maintaining museums, whether it's the Department of Motor Vehicles. Yes, we all have complaints about those things, but guess what? They work. And handing these things off to, I was broke down, where was it? Illinois or Indiana? It might have been Indiana. Broke down the side of the road waiting for AAA to come, and a private security guard shows up on Interstate 80 and tells me that I'm not allowed to be there because it's a private road, and that if I don't get out of there right away with my flat tire, that this private company is going to tow me and then charge me a bunch of money. This is what's happening with the privatization of our highway system. The list is endless, and we have limited time. As president, we need to have a global living wage, not just a living wage here, not just a $15 an hour minimum wage. We need to have a global living wage, because what good is having a minimum wage if they export the jobs? We need to not buy products from countries that have slave labor for sure, which is, an issue right now in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where we've allowed, I believe it was Malaysia, to have slave labor. My goodness gracious, are we out of our minds? But we need to have everybody being paid a living wage in their countries. And there, bring back the unions. The unions are called the internationals for a reason, because we need to have international solidarity. So as president, I will say our treaties will be based on global living wages and not doing business with countries that engage in slavery. We need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need to get off fossil fuels right away. We need to have equal rights for women. We need to have an equal rights amendment for women. Of course, there is the group that has been oppressed in this world more than any other, longer than any other, and more viciously than any other is women. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so we need to recognize our own faults in this in the United States, equal rights amendment for women, and I may say as an Earth Firster, equal rights for all species, recognizing the environment as part of our life-sustaining infrastructure. The environment is why we exist, for goodness sake. And lastly, I want to just say, this might be a little unusual, but I want to say we need to have a taxation system that not only, of course, does not give breaks to the corporations and actually increases taxes to the corporations, but a taxation system that's based on what we spend. Again, by leadership by example. Look at the American public's average debt, to the credit card company, to the mortgage companies. We are a nation that not only has our individuals in debt, but our country's in debt. And so leadership by example means we have a balanced budget. If we, for some crazy reason, want to go to war, then we need to be able to pay for it, and we need the corporations to pay for it. But we're not going to war under my regime, under my administration. However, we have gotten used to spending money we don't have, and I think if we started to say, hey, if you really want to have this or that in the country, then we have to pay for it. And so to understand that we budget our country the way you budget your household, and we tax, and the budget can go up and down every year based on what we spend.
There's a particular international issue, which of course is very pressing to Greens and to everybody, and you sort of alluded to parts of it. I actually think part of very important is when you mentioned the global living wage, because fundamentally a key part of the imbalance of all these trade agreements is how to shift manufacturing to cheap labor. When everybody starts getting a living wage, it becomes a little bit more difficult to play that three-card Monte game with the global economy. But pointedly, the TPP is a big issue. And as you know, Congress just, with the help of the Democrats, passed, and certainly Obama's motivation, passed the fast track. What would be your alternative? What would you do, since you'd have to undo that horrific agreement if you walked into the White House in 2017?
If I had to say that there was one issue that was more important than any others, and I hate to do that because I really think that all the issues are completely connected, but it would be climate change. But if I had to say what really I think is the most important issue, if there was a single unifying issue, it is that we as a human species are in a collective denial about the state of the world, that we are fouling our nests. We treat each other like enemies. We don't understand that the competitive system of capitalism is that which I had a student back when I was teaching at an alternative school, and I have a credential to teach, by the way, English secondary. But I asked him, well, capitalism is a system of competition, and this young man said to me, no. Capitalism is a system of destroying the competition. So we live in a world where we're all out to get each other, as opposed to a world where we cooperate. So I see things like the TPP and NAFTA and GATT really as inevitable under the current trajectory that the human mindset is in. And it's not that everybody has this mindset, but what we are subjected to is not a few people making the decisions. It's a system. Because when those people die, some people come and take it over. It's like when the mafia dies or gets killed, another one takes its place because there's a system. It's a system, I call it the Pentagon of power. You've got your communication system, your educational system, your technological system, your religious system, and there's one more I'm leaving out, but the point is that we are locked into a system of death and destruction. It is led by what I call the unholy trinity of fear, hate, and greed. And so as President of the United States, I'm going to say what Franklin Roosevelt said. You know, you say, oh, Daryl's just some kind of woo-woo spiritualist. Franklin Roosevelt said it. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. We have to become unafraid to take a look at what this world has become. And I tell you, if there are 7 billion people on this planet right now, there are 7 billion jobs out there to fix it. So as far as the TPP goes, I'm sorry I can't answer that question because we're pretty much locked into those things. But I say to you, we need to change the way every single person thinks. Because even though the rich may be pulling the strings, so they think, they're not really, because they're just pawns in a system that has started long before they were born. Even though the rich think they're pulling the strings, the poor may die today and the rich will die tomorrow under what's happening right now. We're all about to go. And so we have to eliminate this system of corporate kingdoms, this real-life Game of Thrones, where corporations are the kingdoms and they're fighting with each other and using us as their pawns. We need to change the way we think. We need to change the way we feel. And we do that through our hearts as much as we do it through our minds. And so I will just, I realize that's a bit esoteric. It's a bit non-specific. But I say this, language. Let's look at language. We talk about black and white, black people and white people. Well, then if you want to talk about a black and white situation, that means a situation where there's two polar opposites. The way we label ourselves pits us against each other. Conservative and liberal. Conservatives don't conserve, for goodness sake. I'm a conservative. I don't want those people taking away my particular philosophy of conserving the environment by calling themselves conservatives. And liberals, well, the conservatives are the ones who are actually very liberal with our resources. We have, pro-choice and pro-life. My goodness, what kind of false dynamics are these? So one of the things as president is I want to start changing the way the language is. If I may be so bold on this set, why do we call people black and white? Why don't we call them brown and tan? That sounds so much less threatening. It makes us seem like we're all on a spectrum of humanity rather than polar opposites. And last I checked, I have not met a single person in the world who was white. I just don't. This right here, that's white. Okay? You see it? That ain't my face, and that ain't nobody's face, if you'll pardon my my linguistics. And I don't really think there's anybody who is pure black. We should not be labeling ourselves these things that create a false dynamic of polarization, of divide and conquer. And we really need to look at the fact that, John Edwards, the discredited, Democratic candidate for president a few years ago, said there are two Americas. I said to you, no, there are not two Americas. There's 300 million Americans. There are 300 million of us. Each one of us has our own story. Each one of us has a passion for our own lives that is as important to us as the next person's is to themselves. And we need to have a government of not one size fits all, but a government that allows us all to contribute the best that we have to offer.
Since in the Green Party there's many definitions of winning, or actually politically there's many definitions of winning, even though the public only views winning the White House as the only means. Your platform, in theory, should be key to providing impetus and catalyst for local activity, and local activity is the root of growing the Green Party. So, an important issue is in the Green Party is that we've been around for upwards of 30 years now in the United States. In 1984 or so, since the first meetings, and visible on the political spectrum since the early 90s, running for local offices. What do you want to do to escalate Green Party growth, local activity on up? How do you do that?
Yes. Well, I've already spoken about, and I won't repeat, the need to start filling school board positions. I find that is the one political position that has the most potential for passion behind it, especially with this advent of creationism being thrown into the agenda, not to mention just all the junk that they feed us. And as I mentioned, so really starting to say, you're a political party, we're a political party, Green Party. Why aren't we running for more offices? Do we really, are we serious? Do we take ourselves seriously? I do believe there is an opportunity to inspire people to run for office. But as a presidential candidate or a potential presidential candidate, part of what anybody does in a primary system is not just play to win, but also play to influence the agenda. Whether it's if Jill Stein becomes the nominee, I would like to see her embrace some of the positions that I've been taking, maybe even some of the style that I have to offer. And in fact, I sent Jill Stein the Who Bombed Judi Bari movie because I think Judi Bari is one of the most magnificent communicators with people. She really resonates, particularly with women, but people in general. I am very much into supporting the other candidates, including the others who might be running for president, into embracing some of the positions I hold. That's what people do in primaries. And it's also what you do. You also have the opportunity to do that in the general discussion. If you're in the newspapers, if you're on television, if you're handing out, if you're on the internet, and a show like this, you have the ability to influence the way people think and behave and to inspire them to action. Words inspire people. Dr. King, Mahatma Gandhi, Susan B. Anthony, Malcolm X, so many people out there, Ralph Nader, have inspired people into action because words can inspire. Words have meaning. They're more than words. Now, sometimes words can just be words, like, oh yeah, we support this cause, we support that. But it's more than just supporting it. It's being part of it. It's being either in the streets or it's being in political office. It's about some or other taking more of a position than just saying that you favor something. So yes, I would, and by the way, I'm a fundraiser. I have been raising money. I haven't tallied it up, but certainly a couple $1 million over the last 25 years for various causes. I just raised $40,000 for a friend with cancer. I raised another $10,000 for another friend with cancer. I've raised money to stop the use of rat poison in our area, a whole media campaign for that, several $1,000s. I'm always in, and not to mention the fact that I produced a movie for which I raised well over $100,000. So my point is that I also have fundraising abilities that I can bring to the party and teach people also how to raise funds for themselves, as well as teaching them some of my media experience. I've written hundreds of press releases. I've done thousands of interviews. I'm in about 3 dozen books that you can, just type my name into Amazon and you'll see what books come up with my name in them. So I have this experience, and I'm also a teacher. Doesn't mean I'm a good teacher, but I would like to think that I do have the ability to teach. My father was a union teacher also in New York City. And so, by the way, I'm a union musician, by the way. I'm a member of the Local 1000 of the American Federation of Musicians. And I've worked also with the steelworkers and a number of other, I just had to throw that in there because I can't emphasize enough how important the unions are. And the unions are a natural Green Party constituency, but they, like a number of the other communities, seem to be beholden to the Democratic Party because our party, the Green Party, hasn't shown itself serious enough to warrant their embracing us and giving up their relationship with the Democrats. And so part of it, being serious, is getting a hold of those school board positions, those hospital board positions, and it's just a simple fact. If you're a political party, you need to run for office. We have 515,000 elected positions in this country. The Green Party currently holds about 135 of them, about the same as the Libertarian Party. 135 out. That's like 1/3 of 1/100th of 1%. It's a pretty minuscule number. Forgive me if my math is off, but it's pretty minuscule. That's not necessary. We could be holding 1,000 positions tomorrow if we simply decided to run for or get appointed to the positions that nobody wanted to run for. We could do that by the end of this year, by November. So maybe we just need somebody to start cracking the whip and browbeating the party into getting those offices.
Yep, yep. There's I think there needs to be a fire lit on the feet of the Greens to take a step forward. It's
work.
Yep.
It's work. Being an activist, being a elected official, being a political activist, it's work. It's one of the things I always tell people, this is not a joyride. You actually have to be committed, and you have to really put your energy into it. And so you have to pick an issue, pick a political office that you're passionate about, and pick a political office where you see a vacuum, where you see a need, and there's no shortage of them.
In my own experience, working locally and having ran for office a few times. Unfortunately, in New York City, there's nothing resembling a local office. The smallest office you can run for in New York City is State Assembly, State House. City Council is actually a larger office than State House. That's how big New York City is. But I know from my experience that if you're an activist and develop a relationship with the press, when it comes time to run for office, they pay attention. And it doesn't necessarily mean they like you. I had one newspaper at one point said, I disagree with everything you stand for. He was a conservative Democrat, the publisher. He said, I disagree with everything you stand for, but you do a lot of stuff. He said, you do more than the Republicans do. He said, I sort of view you as the loyal opposition. So we got covered. We got covered regularly in his newspaper, just because it was a cause for discussion and debate in what would otherwise be a one-party town. And at one point, one local newspaper actually threatened some of the community organizations and Democratic clubs and said, if you don't include him in the debates, we're going to trash your debate. And it's strange for a newspaper to do. And the reporter, she explained to me why she did this. And the irony is, I should say, this included Democratic primary debates, which I was not a Democratic candidate. But first of all, she told me what she was doing. She had contacted a couple of the clubs and said, look, all the members of your clubs are going to have to vote for somebody in the general election. They may not be happy with the Democrat who wins. And it's your responsibility to present to your club members what the alternatives are. And then she told me why she did that. She said, Craig, you have more record in the community as an activist than any of these candidates who were coming out of congressional chief of staff positions and whatever. They were low-level professional politicians. They weren't activists. So I think it's really important for to just start working on the issues and make sure the media knows about it. Don't even worry if they like or dislike you. Make sure they know about it, and then when it comes time, you'll break through the key wall, which is local press, which is a little bit easier to break through than in big metro press or state press, and then and if you're in an area where there are such smaller races like school board, you have the network.
Yes.
How does a presidential campaign tie into that?
Well,
since
Craig,
you've done one, let me just.
I have to just say that my daughter is about to walk into the house right now. I hear the babysitter pulling up with the vehicle, and I was under the impression this would be an hour show. I'm more than happy to talk to you longer under normal circumstances, but I didn't contract longer for a childcare while we did this show. I'm tempted to have her come on the air and say a few words, but let me tell you that as a candidate, I believe controversy, as an experienced public relations person, controversy gets you in the papers. One thing gets you on television. Not just being milquetoast doesn't cut it. And one of the people that I studied under, starting at age 5, was the legendary, one of the shapers of the '60s, Tony Schwartz. Tony Schwartz did the Daisy commercial. It was it was a Lyndon Johnson commercial. A little girl picking daisies and the atom bomb blows up in the background. I worked for him between the ages of 5 and 11. I was a member of the Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA. I was a union member. I paid for my college education by the time I was 11, doing commercials only for Tony, because Tony only used his neighbors. He was a genius. He did 5 presidential campaigns. He did countless senators and congresspeople. He was a leftist, socialist man he did anti-cigarette smoking commercials. He did anti-pollution commercials. And he believed that he knew that controversy is what makes it. It's what gets you into papers. And that Daisy commercial, the one that targeted Barry Goldwater, and it was pro Lyndon Johnson, it ran more in the news for free. The news covered that advertisement more than any amount of advertising could have paid for as a commercial. So my advice to people is be controversial. Of course, in a good way, but figure out what the media likes, but be sincere about it and give it to them. And so my family is arriving, and I want to thank you for our time here on your show. I'm enjoying this exploration. I'm going to be at the annual national meeting in St. Louis. I'm looking forward to meeting Jill Stein. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you. And I'm looking forward to participating in the presidential forum, which I think will be very exciting, not to mention all the other workshops that are going to happen there. And I want to thank the Green Party for having the annual national meeting in St. Louis, right next door to Ferguson. I know there will be a field trip to Ferguson and a rally as part of the convention. And I also there's going to be an open mic, and I hear tell that both Jill Stein and myself are going to be singing. We're going to be singing our songs and during the open mic. So, you know what? If you can't sing, I don't want to be in your revolution.
And that's not unprecedented. Bill Clinton had a saxophone, and the Green Party, we have our singers.
Obama sings and writes songs too, by the way, even though he may not be our cup of tea, and we kind of, but he wrote a song about John McCain in the tune of "If I Only Had a Brain." It was called "If I Only Had McCain." He sang it for the National Press Club. No, we've had some entertainers in the White House. It's true.
Yeah, I think entertainment is actually a critical feature to be a president. And nobody in our party has done anything like bedtime for Bonzo.
Right.
Right. I think we have better entertainers.
People say, sometimes people say to me, "You're not a serious candidate, Darryl Cherney," and I say to you, "You're right. I'm not a serious candidate. I'm a humorous candidate."
Right. It speaks to the heart, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so my position as far as my presidential exploration is I want the party to pretty much ask me to run. I don't want to go so far as to necessarily say I want to be drafted, but I don't want to run. I don't want to be part of a primary in which you can choose between Jill Stein or myself. I don't want to be part of that unless the party wants me to be. So I'm going to St. Louis to talk to you face to face to find out what you would like me to do in this party, and I will listen to you and change and work my positions and listen to your advice and put the Green Party as a very important part of healing this planet.
Thank you very much for being with us tonight, Daryl. And I have a hunch the forum at the annual national meeting, if it isn't live streamed, it will be recorded also. So it'll be yet another opportunity for people to become more familiar with you. And I think, judging from the audiences I've seen, there may be interest in hearing more from you.
Right. Well, thank you, Craig, and have a wonderful night. And thank you for the opportunity. I think the internet television is going to be the wave of the future. And as a candidate, if I choose to do that, I will be putting out professionally done internet commercials. Look at my movie, Who Bombed Judi Bari? I'll send out free copies to anybody who wants one in the Green Party. Just email me with your address, DC at asis.com. That's my initials, DC at ASIS.com. Go to my movie website, Who Bombed Judi Bari? And of course, check out my platform on Facebook at Daryl Cherney for President Exploratory Committee.
And thank you, Daryl, and have a good night. And we'll be hearing from you probably in, I guess, is it 2-3 weeks at the annual
I think it's only
meeting.
2 weeks away. It's coming
Yes.
right on us.
Give some things for people to chew on in the meantime as they evaluate. This will be up and running also. I will have it up on YouTube. So those who missed it.
Thank you for all your hard work, Craig. Have a good night.
And thank you, Daryl, because you certainly have a long history of hard work as an activist. Take care.
Take care. You too. Peace.
Hi. I hope you've learned a lot about Daryl Cherney tonight. I think he would be an interesting candidate. Again, for those who aren't familiar with the Green Party procedures, we are an FEC recognized political party, and we already have ballot access in about 21 states, and there are more being added. So if you're in a state with ballot access, you will probably have an opportunity, should Daryl announce, to vote in a primary or a caucus, just like the corporate parties, or I wouldn't say just like, with their own perspective and procedures and much more small d democratic rules. And in states that don't have a primary caucus option, you'll probably have a state convention option. And so being a Green is important at this time, because you're going to have some significant discussions and choices regarding our candidates. And there are other candidates who have announced and or are exploring running for president as a Green. And we're going to be continuing these shows every week, or certainly at least every 2 weeks, interviewing additional candidates. So you'll have the opportunity to hear from the others, and again, as we can, take audience questions from our chat. And as some of you are realizing, the chat gives you a very good opportunity to talk to each other. So this isn't simply a webcast discussion with the potential candidates, but an opportunity for you Greens around the country to discuss things related to what you hear and what you want in candidates. And this will give you the opportunity to do that outside of your own state parties. With that, we are going to look to have another one of these at some point next week. I can't say for certain it will be at the same time, because there's always contingencies between schedules of key Green meetings and key candidates. But we hopefully will be able to do this next week. And of course, in 2 weeks, we will try to stream portions of the annual national meeting, so you will hear more there. So this programming will become much more regular throughout the campaign season. We want to make sure more of you get an opportunity, that you don't have to wait for candidates to be on your doorstep. And I'll also say this, as part of activism, Daryl talked about running for local office, but as part of getting the word out, even amongst us Greens, all of you should take it upon yourselves, take on the responsibility to let people know that these shows exist. We have tens or hundreds of thousands, especially if you consider enrollment statistics, hundreds of thousands of Greens, and certainly thousands that are active. And all of them will have an opportunity to make a decision as to who our presidential candidate will be. I know of recent there's been a lot of Greens who are looking elsewhere in other parties for to other candidates, but we have a decision here we need to be able to make, and it's part of building our party, because unlike other parties, grassroots participation is paramount, and it's not simply walking into a voting booth and checking a piece of paper. It's not simply who am I voting for, which is how people talk about it when they refer to other candidates. With us, with this party, it's who are you working for, and who isn't just the candidate, but who is also the party. And that's part of what makes us different, and that's why it's important for us to be involved with the Greens directly. And that's why working for this party and working for whichever one of our candidates you choose to, and then getting behind the one that wins the nomination, is critical for building the party. And that building will result, once you learn the skill sets, if you haven't already, will result in many more local candidates. Because ultimately, it's not the hero figure that will save us. It is not the presidential candidate, but it is the thousands of Greens running and winning local office, and through their experience climbing up, passing the political thresholds from school boards and town boards to running for state legislatures. And one thing a presidential campaign does do is with the ballot line, it creates the possibility of a slate. So in addition to the presidential candidate, in every district, there can be a state house candidate. And in the subsequent year, or in this year, if the elections haven't happened in your community, there can be local races. And all these are building blocks, and you have to participate in all them. And if you're in a town where Greens is just you, by doing this work, it will no longer just be you. That's how I started. It was me, and then it was me and 5 friends, and we ran for office. And of course, on the first run, we didn't do all that well, and as I said before, for us it was State House, smallest race you could run for. But post-campaign, as an activist, I would go out, hand out flyers, do stuff, and people would come by and say, I voted for you. And it was then, how do I get involved? So amongst that subset, we built so that the next time we ran, it wasn't 10 people. By the third race, we had a couple of hundred volunteers just for a state house race. And that's how it works. You build. So hopefully this is what our presidential campaign offers. And Daryl is acutely aware of it, Darryl Cherney, having held local office. And as you will find, some of our other candidates announced or exploring have also worked locally and have been fairly successful. So we are all building, and this is your chance to participate. And with that, I'll say good night, and hopefully see you next week, and definitely we'll see you in the next 2 weeks. But once we get the information out on Facebook and Twitter for next week's show, it is incumbent upon you to share and invite people. You have to do it. Tell your friends, and even tell them if they're not Greens, because Alternative 2016 should be an alternative for everybody, a green alternative. With that, I'll say good night, and keep paying attention on Facebook as we get more information out on our next interview.